Welcome to the Faith and Business Podcast. I'm your host, Elle Edwards, the Happiness Geek from the Faith and Business Playground, here with Bible-friendly brain gymnastics to help you be joyful for Jesus in 2019. In today's episode of the podcast, we are going to be thinking about the idea of doing more of the things that make you happy versus finding the happiness in the life that you're already living. Now, this episode was inspired by a conversation I had in one of the Facebook groups I'm in. Some of you listening may know that for 2019, at least, I'm stepping away from my Facebook page. For me and Facebook, groups are where it's at. So that's why I've got my own Facebook group. I got my free Facebook group. I've also got the paid Faith and Business community for those people who want to have the coaching as well. But I'm also in a number of Facebook groups. And I think it was last week I posted a link or mentioned a book that I've been reading. My dad for Christmas, he only bought one Christmas present last year. That's not to say he didn't give gifts. My mum is in charge of it. But there was one book that he actually bought. Because he said to me in church like a few weeks beforehand, have you read The Happiness Advantage? And I thought, that rings a bell. But I looked back on my Amazon history and nope, I haven't read that. Excellent, he said, I'm going to buy it for you for Christmas. And so he did. And I've been reading it and it's really good. I'm loving it. I haven't quite finished it at the time of recording because it's only a couple of 100 pages long, but it's really meaty. And it's lots of science experiments around happiness and proof that being happy makes you more successful and all this other stuff. It's really good. However, I've been enjoying it so much, I mentioned it in a Facebook group that I'm in. And lots of people were like, oh yeah, I read that, I haven't read that, blah, blah. But one lady made a really interesting comment and she said, I need to get better. I haven't got the comment open in front of me, so I'm going to paraphrase it. Effectively, she was saying, I need to get better at doing more of the things that make me smile. I don't really know what those things are yet, though. And we had a conversation from there where I basically said, well, actually, yes, that's a great idea. It's wonderful to identify the things that bring you joy. It's great to do more of the things that light you up. But my philosophy is actually about empowering you and equipping you with the tools that you need to find the smiles in day-to-day life. If you can get to the point where you've trained your brain to find the wonderful things in a day by default, it becomes much easier to then recognize the things that bring you joy and to do more of them. But it also becomes easier when you're doing one of those traditional happy things, like when you go on holiday, that's meant to be a happy time, or if it's your birthday, or it's Christmas, or I don't know, there's some traditional happy moment. If your mindset's not in the right place, you can go on holiday and be thoroughly miserable. I'm not wishing that on you, but just because it's a happy, in inverted commas, occasion, doesn't mean that you're absolutely guaranteed to be happy. You know, weddings are wonderful occasions. They're a celebration of love, and they should be really happy celebrations. But if you're in a really not very positive frame of mind, it can be a horrible time, and it can feel really lonely as well. So my philosophy is about giving you the tools that you need to help you find those smiles anyway, regardless of what day of the week it is, regardless of whether it's a work day, whether you're on holiday, who you're coming into contact with. If you can raise your default baseline of happiness, if seeing the lovely things in a day become your default, it becomes day-to-day life is more lovely, and it becomes easier to appreciate those joyful moments. So that's effectively what we're exploring and talking about a little bit in today's episode of the podcast. And it ties in with one of my favorite ever topics, because I'm not going to make any apologies for this, but I love the fact that this came up in the book I was reading. I call it yellow car syndrome. It's actually the reticular activating system is the part of your brain. It does lots of clever stuff. I want to say it has stuff to do with regulating temperature, for example. So it does lots of really practical stuff. But the really fun thing that it does, and the reason why I rabbit on about it so much, is it acts as a filter. And it filters in the things that are important to you. Now, in the book, in The Happiness Advantage, Sean calls it the Tetris effect. So what happened in this, I'm not going to tell you all about it. I'll link to the book in the show notes. You can read it yourself if you're interested into digging more. But the outline of it is these, there were some, I want to say high school students or university students. There were some students who were paid in this study to play Tetris. Do you remember Tetris? If you're as old as I am, you'll remember Tetris is when you shift the blocks around and you have to move them and if you make a complete line, then that line disappears. And the goal is to keep on fitting these boxes together neatly such that you never get up to the top of, because if all the boxes go up, stack, and they reach the top, then it's game over. So that's the goal, is to sort of shift these boxes around. And these graduates, I think they were, or university students, these students, whatever, I don't know what type of school they were in, these students then, they were paid as part of this study to play Tetris for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. And then afterwards, they started seeing Tetris patterns everywhere. They couldn't help themselves. Their brain had got so conditioned to this idea of shifting blocks around and finding patterns. They saw them everywhere. So they'd go out shopping, for example, and they'd see like a line of cereal, and then it wouldn't be quite neat, and they'd see how to rearrange it. Because their brain, they'd spent so much time playing Tetris, their brain knew it was important, and then it kept filtering in more and more examples. The reason why I sometimes call it yellow car syndrome, officially on the internet it's called blue car syndrome, but I have a yellow car, hence why I call it yellow car syndrome. But it was funny because I was talking about this so much and calling it yellow car syndrome. One of my friends thought that was the actual name for it. It's not, apologies, it's actually blue car syndrome. I call it yellow car syndrome though because 2013, I think it was, I bought a yellow car. It's a bright yellow car. I love it, really sunshiny, and it's really hard to be grumpy when you're driving a yellow car, not least because people living in your local area, they recognize you easily. And so you don't want to be grumpy and then someone knows it's you. That's horrible, isn't it? But what was interesting was after I bought this yellow car, I started seeing yellow cars all over the place. And some of my friends as well, they started seeing yellow cars around town. We went to France a couple of years after buying the yellow car, and we saw literally the exact same car parked next to ours. It was a French car, we were in France, but other than the number plate being a French number plate, and I imagine left-hand drive versus right-hand drive, otherwise it was identical. I've got a photo somewhere of my car and this car side by side in the car park. It was brilliant. That's because having bought a yellow car, like I noticed them because my brain filters them in. The classic example, there's a famous, and I have to see if I can find the YouTube video, there's a famous study that was done where these, again, students, because students happily need more money and so we'll pay them to do stuff, students were given a video to watch and they were told, right, I need you to count how many goals this team scores. And so they counted them and they got the right number. And then I want to say like at least 75% of them didn't notice that halfway through this video there was a great big man in a gorilla costume waving at the screen. They were so focused on catching and counting the goals, their brain didn't filter in the gorilla, even though it was huge, and you'd think, well, they would notice that. So when you go about your day, and maybe you've had times where you've got frustrated with somebody, it's often someone we love, sometimes it's a spouse, maybe you've got cross with your spouse because he or she hasn't noticed this particular thing. Like, how could you not notice? Sometimes it's not actually their fault. Their brain will filter it such that they literally don't see it, which on the face of it sounds completely bananas. Like, how could you not see that? But it wasn't filtered in. And so that's all thanks to the reticular activating system. Because if you were to consciously notice and manually process every single piece of information that would be thrown at you in the day, you go crazy. You just couldn't do it. There are so many stimuli, and I don't really think we're completely aware of everything that's coming at us in a day. We're not aware of it because our brain filters the things that it deems important. So, for example, I have lilies. I love the smell of lilies. I know some people hate that. Sorry about that. But I do. I love the smell of lilies. And so most of the time I will have some lilies in my office. And it's interesting, actually, most recently that after the Christmas break, I didn't have any because we went away. So I've just recently had a new bunch of lilies in my office, and they smell amazing. And I notice that smell every single time I come in here. You know, we talk about going nose blind. I haven't gone nose blind to lilies, and I'm convinced that's because my brain knows that I love the smell of lilies. And so it filters in that smell. By contrast, nobody else in my house has mentioned my lilies. You know, no one's going to go, oh, what's that lovely smell? And in my head, I'm thinking, well, how have you not noticed? Why it smells so gorgeous? I haven't asked them, incidentally, about it, but it's just fascinating to me that no one's mentioned it. And probably because they don't filter it in. It's not important to them. Now, yes, of course, particularly if you have children, there are times when I do believe in selective deafness. You know, if you're asking them to take their plates through to the kitchen, or you're asking them to tidy up something or do a thing that's not particularly fun for them, they will be deaf, in inverted commas. They won't hear you. They won't notice. And so I'm not saying that every time this happens, we can necessarily say it's because of their reticular activating system. But I do wonder if actually it's more often the case than not. You know, we probably don't give enough credit to those things that are and are not filtered into our consciousness. So it's interesting to me that you know, how much our brains do affect and impact the way that we show up in this world, and they do impact what our day-to-day experiences are like. And so I wanted to encourage you, if you're somebody who likes this idea of doing more of the things that makes you smile, if you know, I mean, ultimately everyone wants to be happy. Most people, and I do know over the years, I've known one or two people who actually, I think they quite enjoy being miserable. Maybe you know people who enjoy being miserable too. But most people, if you ask them, you know, they'd say, of course I want to be happy. Everybody wants to have a delightful, happy life. And so if that's something that you sometimes struggle with, and if, like my friend in that Facebook group, you're a bit like, well, I know I ought to be doing more of the things that make me smile, but I either don't know how to fit more into my day, or I don't even know what those things are. I want to encourage you, ease the pressure. Because if we put pressure on ourselves, I need to find out what makes me happy and do more of it, that's just more stress. Instead, I want to challenge you. And I mentioned this in the Mindset Minute today. So if you're listening to this as a result of the Mindset Minute, apologies, what I'm about to say, you've already heard it. However, I want to offer you a challenge. I want to challenge you for the next 7 days. And in the Mindset Minute, I said 3, but I'm extending it because I've got more time to explain it. I want to challenge you for the next 7 days to keep your eyes open for those things that put a smile on your face. And they don't have to be monumental things. Like, I always give the example of orange slugs. I actually haven't seen an orange slug for a while, but I saw an orange slug for the first time many years ago. I want to say maybe 4 years ago, 5 years ago, walking up the path with the children on the way to school. And I went, oh, that's an orange slug. I've never seen an orange slug before. It was almost neon orange. It was fascinating. And ever since then, I see orange slugs from time to time. So that's my example. And it's a stupid example. Slugs on the face of it, they're like slimy and gross and ugh. I don't actually like slugs, but orange slugs, they're quite fascinating. And so I want to challenge you to keep your eyes open for those things that just put a smile on your face. If you're not practiced at this, if you don't naturally smile a lot, just notice when it gives a little half smile. Anything that gives you pause, go, oh, a little bit of delight. And then, ideally, record it in some way. So, I mean, I'm probably going to start doing this on my Instagram stories a bit more, actually, to sort of lead by example. So if you're on social media, Instagram stories is perfect for this. But whatever, record in some way. It hasn't got to be social media. You could just write something down. As part of my my Win the Week planner, every morning I write down 3 things that I'm thankful for. I've just started with my youngest every night at bedtime. He has what's called worry time. So we have 5 minutes where he's allowed to talk about all the stuff that he's worried about, and then we put it out of the way, because otherwise he's better at it now. But when he was a little bit younger, he used to chew over his worries and spend so much time focused on what he was worried about, his brain was filtering in more the same. Do you see how this works? And so instead, instead he has a designated worry time. But after worry time, I've now instigated 3 things that make you happy time, to act as a counterbalance to that, and to get him into the habit of paying attention and looking out for those little things. It doesn't really matter when in the day that you do this. Ideally, you want to get to the point where you start noticing those little smiley things off and on throughout the day, because you're just sort of topping yourself up with feel-good feelings. So why would you not want to do that? But as you get practice and as you start this, find a time in the day, build a habit around it. The more you do it, the easier it will become because of the way your brain is wired. So just give it a go though. Even if you think, oh my gosh, that sounds ridiculous, just try it anyway. It's not ridiculous. There's actual science that proves it. But I know on the face of it, it can sound a bit ridiculous. It's all that, oh, that nonsense thankfulness stuff. No, it's actually backed up by real science. But give it a go for yourself. Try it out. Just try it for 7 days. See what impact it has. I'd love it then if it becomes something that you love doing. You keep on doing, of course. I'm not gonna lie, but just try it for 7 days. Look at it as an experiment, as a bit of a game, and see what comes up as a result. And this feels like a really good time to remind you, if you feel like you need help with this stuff, if you'd like to be in a community of like-minded people who are working together to bring more delight into their day-to-day life, come on over to theleagueofbrilliance.com. That will redirect you to my free Facebook group, which is also called The League of Brilliance. Because together it's small at the moment, but I'm looking to build a community of people who are wanting to be joyful for Jesus in 2019. Together, we really can make a difference. We can be I would love to have 2019 be the year where I help empower and equip you to show up with a smile on your face so you can be loving and full to the top with God's love and infect, in a good way, the people around you. So, going back to the experiment though, give it a go, see how you get on. And like I say, if you need support with it, come on over to faithandbusinessplayground.com and join us for free today. In the meantime, thank you for listening. Subscribe if you're not already subscribed, and I look forward to catching up with you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.